So what we're going to do, I will allow Tom, 4 or 5 minutes, kind of make an opening statement to tell you who he is, where he's going, why the world's going to be a better place if in fact he is, when he is elected governor of California. And that then I'll ask him a few questions. I have some in mind I think are relevant. And then we'll open it up for questions from you. We're starting late, and I apologize for that. We will be done within an hour. But at any rate, we will proceed. Then we'll go to the dinner and the gala. And by the way, let me put in an editorial comment too. Susan Shelley is really worth listening to. She's really quite a lady, quite a columnist, and really has it down fundamentally. There's one more issue that kind of an advertisement. I wrote a book a while ago called A Voter's Handbook, Effective Solutions to America's Problems, and I'm proud of it. It's been endorsed by numbers of libertarians, and instead of sitting at home in my garage in a box, I thought, why not? So I've donated them to the Libertarian Party of California, and Mimi's going to make them available. Whatever sale takes place, all the money comes to the party. So I'm happy about that. I'm proud of the book, and it's just meant to encourage a discussion. We've got to get away from this polarization that's just rampant in our country today. And we libertarians are the ones that can do it. So with that, we're going to figure out who it is, why it is, and when it is. And right now, we're going to see one of them. Tom Woodard, take it away.
Thank you. Well, hey, everybody, good evening or good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here to hear my talk and my questions and all that, and for vetting my candidacy, which I really appreciate. So I've been working on reading and researching the big issues that California faces since midsummer. The hard part is not trying to find the information, not anymore. Information is everywhere. The hard part is actually finding the information and fighting off all the cynicism that it breeds in you. Because the more and more I delved into the real issues that confront my state of origin today, the easier it would be to just close the computer and walk away, especially at my age. But the problem is it's a chore to not drown in cynicism, and it's also a chore not to drown in credulity and just believe everything you hear. As you wade through the details of our self-governance today, it's a mess. You would think that I would have known the answer to a question my brother Bob asked me just this week when we spoke. He said to me, so Tom, what do you consider the most important issue that California faces today? The single most important? And I go, wow, that's a tough question, because there's so many things, and by the way, to me, they tend to be very related one to the other. You can't really separate them out. Of course, the political way of answering this would be a big straightforward question like this is to ask for more context, grab for the frame I want to use, and then recite something that I've already thought about and have some language around, some meta language, so I can sound intelligent about it. But the truth of it is that I'd rather not have language cooked up for these occasions. I'd rather I thought about this answer very much, and in my deep dive into the issues facing our state, I have found that they're often so connected, they're like a hydra, the Greek mythology monster, the nine-headed monster, the sea monster that ate men and beasts. And many of the current issues that we face in California are merely symptoms of other problems or related to one another. And I thought about the question a bit, and then I answered my brother with this. The single biggest problem that California faces is today, in my opinion, the extreme polarity within its citizenry. And I would extend that to the rest of the country as well. This polarity in us have been inflamed and are being inflamed by two big forces. Number one, in California, a monopoly of government. And this monopoly has effectively been, it's often misstated in the press, it's really been 60 years, if you go back to how long there's been a dominant presence in the state legislature. And the second one is that these parties are ginning everything up on both sides of the fence We're in this monopoly of governance in California, but nationally we're in this tug of war where every day we are being bombarded by what I call the outrage industrial complex. Everything in the news is designed to keep our attention. It's designed to hit us with something that we got to worry about today and then hit us tomorrow with something else. You might notice the crises that we've had to deal with in the last few years are like a skipping stone on a pond and then it sinks, but don't worry, there's another one coming the next day. It's hard to keep up with. And if you're like me, I like to triangulate information when I get it. And the news sources that exist and draw customers and draw views and eyeballs through outrage. And so it's very difficult to triangulate and get real information on what's going on if you're listening to the news or social media, which oftentimes is much worse. So we're living in a time of architected polarity while trying to address some very real issues that are in part spawned by this same polarity. It's a really difficult environment. Any effort to address real issues in this environment is a brutal exercise, like the Nazgul in The Lord of the Rings were evil, murderous beings that flew around on these giant dragons, and they were terrible and they were murderous, and they instilled fear and despair into their opponents. I might take a little longer. I can't do 5. They were murderous beings who instilled fear and despair into their opponents. Men lost their ability to fight as they were shaken to the bone by their piercing cries. The sirens in Homer's Odyssey had irresistible attraction in their music and songs that led many to their death, crashing against the coastline rocks after being hopelessly lured by overwhelming attraction to their beguiling music and voices. Tom, come on, these are myths and fairy tales, true, but I would tell everybody here we're living in a time of Nazgul and sirens. We have them all around us. That's the environment that we're in, and that's the environment that any candidate has to face today when they're running for office. Critical thinking is one of the most important tools in our shed, but it's been canceled by the outrage industrial complex. And real discussions of issues don't happen very often. There's very few people that actually want to have real discussions. They need to be happening, but we need to be the ones pulling it off, but it's very difficult. We obviously have the tools to know and to do better. There's hope to be had in 2 places. Those 2 places are found in this room today, I think. One is the future, which we have in common with all human beings. And if you really look at the polarity that exists today across our country and in our state, it's in the present. It's about personalities and about do I have to, are you saying, okay. Okay. I'll take one more minute and then I'll be done, okay? And so the 2 places that we can find hope is in the future. If we define the future, there's a lot of people that would agree with us that today might be at odds with each other. And so that's what my campaign is going to focus on. And the second thing is libertarianism. We have this great message and we have the great formula for how we can get out of polarity and actually get back to critical thinking and do things through our own private initiative. And yet that has gone begging because of the environment that we're in. So I look forward to talking today about what actually are the issues and answering questions and everything. But I think we have the software. The Libertarian Party has the software. What we don't have in this state and across the country is the hardware. We need to recruit, we need to attract, and we need to be out there with a message. I hope that's what we pull off this year. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Governor Woodard. So now you are governor, and we acknowledge, for example, that there were 2 disastrous fires here in Southern California. The rebuilding process is not ongoing, particularly. Affordable housing is not there, Governor Woodard. What are you going to do now in your term of office to assist with regard to these things?
Boom, 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 boom. There we go. Well, there's 2 things about the crisis, especially the fires that happened in Pacific Palisades and other places, Altadena, et cetera. And there's all kinds of obstacles to resolving the issues that have come up with that. the permitting to rebuild, et cetera, and all of the rules and regulations, but also, and I can't emphasize this enough, I looked into the problem a lot, and the litigation that's going on against cities, against fire departments, against landowners, and against residents, and all these things, it's a mess. How to cut through that, to be honest with you, I've looked at it, and I don't have a 100% clear answer because it's a swamp. But I do think that if you look in general at the housing crisis, not just what got burned out, we have a 3.5 million unit shortage in California right now of housing. And if you look at the next 15 years, we have something close to 12 million homes that have to be built in 15 years. What I'm proposing as an emergency measure is that the housing crisis be focused on 3 basic communities. That's the elderly, it's the immigrant, and it's the Gen Z that's fleeing our state at 80,000 to 100,000 a year right now. We need to keep our entrepreneurial young class here in this state. We cannot afford for them to leave and go elsewhere. So I would create through executive action and also through tax incentives, et cetera, to create a modular and mini home revolution. There's over 25 companies now making commercially acceptable modular homes. These homes at times could be put into developments by private party developers, and they could be amenitized to the point where you could have a starting home that might be around $60,000. Now, $60,000 is, especially if you consider the normal kinds of financing that the market would provide, et cetera, that's not very expensive per month compared to an almost $1 million per home average sales price in California today, one of the most expensive in the country. So I would do that. I would also attack some of the other things that are structural in our home market, but I really believe in letting the free market go, and I would remove rent control, and I would remove as many of the restrictions and regulations and environmental review, et cetera, as possible to catalyze that market.
Let me follow up, and we'll try to get through this as promptly as we can because we have lots of questions to ask. Are permits necessary for government? For example, as I understand it, if you're going to build a new house, 30% of the cost of construction is paying government permits and going through those. So if I put in a new water heater, for example, in my house under your administration, am I going to have to get a permit in order to do that? Or instead, could I just deal with a contractor that's bonded and licensed? And same thing, if I put a roof on my house, I have to get a permit from various numbers of cities. What is Governor Woodard going to do with regard to that permit situation?
Well,
precisely.
In general, the amount of regulations that have to be cut in the state of California because of the overreach, like what you're talking about, is enormous, and that would just be on the list. But I will say this, that environmental review you're talking about that can cost up to 1/3 of the cost of a new home would be eliminated by focusing on modular and mini homes that are made in a factory. So you can take a model and you can already have it approved as far as its environmental qualifications to be built without having to go through the process that today anybody from any city in California can stop your building even if they're not in your city. Just by filing a protest, and you could be stuck for 1.5 years or 2 years and $150,000 just to build that house. That wouldn't happen with these homes. They would be built in factories already with their approval for that model and then implemented, and you can put these up fairly quickly. The state has 900,000 acres of land in buildable places that are close to population centers, some not as close, some more close, but accessible. And if the state had low-cost leases and incented those companies to hopefully locate in California, right now that's a big task, but they should be located here, we could create a mini home revolution. And we could build more homes more quickly for the sectors that really need them. And I can tell you that after living for 5 years in a home that was only 690 square feet in Mexico, it's doable. It's doable and comfortable. You just have to have that mindset. We need a whole new product.
Let me ask you, 2 days ago, Thursday, my wife, who's sitting up here in front, Grace, and I opened up our utility bill from the Southern California Edison Company, and we have a modest house, and we don't use that much electricity. It was $189 for 1 month for our electricity. What is the governor going to do with regard to utilities? There is a movement, in effect, to put a government freeze upon rates. Do you subscribe to that?
No, the government should stay out of the private market, period. They're already.
What a revolutionary concept.
Let it be a revolutionary concept then. Let's start a revolution on that. But the thing is, the reason California energy prices are so high is because of the rules that they've instituted. And it's a self-inflicted crisis. The same rules that apply to the energy, the natural gas that fires most of the generation in California applies to fuel and gasoline and jet fuel and all that. Because of the rules that California has implemented, we're now we're offshoring, I should say, all the production of the CO2 that they said they were trying to avoid and creating 38% more of it because we're offshoring it. Meanwhile, and I have the math on that. I saw somebody maybe have a question, but here's the thing. With cap and trade, with carbon recapture, with the fuel standards that they have, and with the extra fees that they add, that's why California gasoline and fuel is so expensive, and that's why your electrical bill is so expensive. Now, how do we get rid of that? I propose that we, on an emergency basis, cancel all of those. It's not doing anything except offshoring and creating more CO2. And if that's their reason, whether I agree with it or not, then let's use their own logic against them. All of California should be back in the oil business until the day that we have fusion power commercially available. We need to have cheap, homegrown fuel. It will be the cheapest by coming from here. And we need to do away with all of the other restrictions that are creating this artificially inflated price gouge that you're talking about.
What a revolutionary concept. I have similar question with regard to occupational licenses. Now, who is in a better position to decide how my hair is cut, me or the government? Should a barber need to get an occupational license in order to do business? Instead of maybe having insurance, the insurance company makes sure that you're not going to cut my scalp when you cut my hair. Shouldn't the private industry erase the government's involvement in that sort of occupational licensing?
That goes under the same category as one of your former questions about the overreach is sickening, and it's a trend that they want to continue. This embedded Democrat Party that's been running the state for so long, and so that I would just put that on the list. We need to have an enormous cut in regulations in this state.
Is that what you're going to do?
Just for your haircut, I'm going to get that done.
I've gotten a haircut lots of times. So there's a movement that California has a deficit. So there's a movement now. We can resolve that by taxing billionaires. What does Governor Woodard feel with regard to the proposed billionaires tax?
It's ridiculous. The government shouldn't be intervening like that and making a special tax class for people that they think can pay it. When the real thing we should be doing is cutting costs. The cost of government, especially administration and jobs, especially in the university system, by the way, has grown to like an incredible level in real dollars based on when I was in college in California. And that needs to be cut. Government can save money by implementing AI and a lot of the functions that they have coming, the AI revolution. And if they did that, they would be able to pay off even their unfunded liabilities by 2048.
But the state of California is really good at building fast bullet trains, are they not? What is Governor Woodard going to do with regard to this really important train that's going to connect San Francisco with Los Angeles expeditiously?
It depends on the price of dynamite at the time that I take office. No, but I would say seriously, here's the thing, that project, first of all, California, I grew up here. This is not a mass transit state. Now, you go on the freeway in the morning, even in big traffic, and what's the lane on the far left like, the carpool lane? Most of the time, they're just zipping by you. Because transportation, especially personal transportation, is just that, it's personal. The future, though, is not in having these massive traffic jams and delays and 9 to 29 billion or 39 billion. It's an enormous amount of money, whatever the number is, about how much efficiency we lose every year because of people spending time getting to work and getting back in the middle of traffic. Now, this is a little radical, but the future of personal transportation is not mass transit, where you have to, everybody's got to stop at these stops before they get to where they go, and then they got to go where they go. It's probably in implementing VTOLs and eVTOLs. The future of transportation, of personal transportation, whether it scares you or not, is probably in the air with flying vehicles. Now there's over 30 companies making them. One California company who's very far along and has a lot of venture capital money behind them, Joby, who I've followed for years, they just signed an agreement to build their manufacturing plant after passing all their regulations and everything with the FAA. In Ohio, they're going to put it. They're a California company because they can't afford to build it here. We should be the epicenter of this technology because it's going to change everything. If you take an example, if you're in Pasadena and you need to get to Burbank for a meeting or something, well, that's about a 12-minute jaunt in an eVTOL, and it could be an hour and a half if you're on the freeway in the morning. And the future is not going to, the technology exists now. Can we be early adapters like California always has been? Are we going to flub this, be the highest cost producer, and no company will locate here, and we will not be implementers of new technology based on cost? We can't do that. We have to be the low-cost producers, and we have to make California ready for the technological revolution that's coming. In AI, in robotics, in transportation, in desalination, in fuel, and in fusion, and in education, and in housing. All that is not going to happen here if we're the largest, if we're the highest cost producer. It's just not going to happen. So we need to
Woodard,
attack that on all levels.
People are not here to hear me talk, they're here to hear you talk, and that's what we're doing. But I have about 2 more questions, and then if any of the people here have questions you'd like to ask of candidate Woodard, please line up and we'll do this. So one of my last questions is, we have ICE enforcing, supposedly, immigration law in California. What do you understand there's a supremacy clause that the federal government's here and they're going to stay here. But what are you going to do, for example, with regard to ICE having masks and unidentified? Are you going to have some form of law passed that all law enforcement officers may not have masks? You know, the court recently said that that was just a law for ICE. No, it has to apply to all law enforcement officers. Are you going to follow that course? Or what are you going to do with regard to the presence and involvement of the federal government in arresting people here in California? Anything?
Yes, absolutely. But so you just opened a Pandora's box, and it's complicated. So I don't want to give too long an answer. But let me just show you. When I talked about the fact that all issues are related, we have an immigration problem. We had an immigration problem that was self-induced from the last administration. But we also consume $350 million a year of illegal drugs from Mexico, and California is 10% of that. 350 billion, I'm sorry. That's the market for illegal drugs at street value in California. I lived in Mexico for 20 years until 18 months ago, and I worked there, and I saw the entire country change in those 20 years from the cartels being just transshippers of drugs into the US to now dominating and having carved up all of Mexico. You can go into a small town in Mexico, a rural town, and see 12-year-olds hooked on chuki, which is crystal meth. Now, why do I bring that up with the question you asked? Because I've seen internal immigration in Mexico when people are moving their whole family, sometimes over 100 people, trying to get away from a town that's now cartel dominated. We have immigration here. A lot of the immigrants are people looking for a better life for themselves and their family. And the problem I have is that this government, before the last administration, they invited all these people in with this incredible program. Now, they also gave control of the border to the cartels. 3 years ago, I looked in the paper of Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and El Salvador Times, and there are advertisements in all those papers to go to the line and into the United States. $8,000, $9,000. We'll do it for $7,000. Anyway, you can do the math, and probably $75 billion was earned by the cartels in the surge of illegal immigrants into the country. That's messed up. At the same time, I believe we should only focus on extraditing capturing and extraditing real criminals, hardened criminals, which also came in the country. That narrative is actually true. So how do we do this, especially with in the midst of all this polarity? Now, my position may not be that popular with some of you, and I apologize. I understand already how libertarians think differently about this. And much respect to everybody. I don't have to be right on this, but here's where I stand. I believe state and local police should cooperate in capturing criminal, undocumented people. I think they should not be declining to help the federal ICE officers to deport them. If we did that, we wouldn't have the street violence that we have now, because there wouldn't be the chaos of ICE agents going into communities which they're not trained for, and they don't know those communities. They might be from Philadelphia or something. And so to defuse that situation, what I would do is I would mobilize the state police to cooperate with ICE, mobilize highway patrol to cooperate with ICE, mobilize and lobby every city to have their city police cooperate with ICE for the extradition of criminal aliens. And I would lobby the federal government that we have a new path to citizenship for the majority of the immigrants who I know some of them. These are people that I worked with and lived with in the Dominican Republic and in Mexico. And they are just looking for a better life for their families. Now, I don't think we should always have an open door. I think we need to have coherent immigration policy. But we need, especially in California, a special dispensation, and we have to lobby the federal government. I would trade our cooperation to capture for these criminals for extradition in exchange for giving us the space to have a new path for citizenship for most of the people that are here.
And discuss it publicly as to what you're doing.
Exactly.
By the way, another announcement, another advertisement. I wrote an article in the Orange County Register, which Susan Shelley actually works with, on November the 2nd. It was an op-ed piece, and it's called Immigration, Doing the Right Thing Isn't Really That Hard. And I don't know if you've read it or not, but Mimi has some of these available. Again, she'll charge us a token amount of money, but I think it really resolves a lot of the immigration issues, and I hope you enjoy it. So, different subject. There's a lot of discussion about voter registration and citizenship. Do you think that is a problem in California? And if so, are you going to do anything with regard to requiring identification of voters before they vote in elections?
I personally, and again, this may not be something that everybody agrees with, I think everybody should have an identification to vote, and I think citizens should vote in the United States. But I think, again, we should give people pathways to citizenship that's coherent, and when they are citizens, that they should be able to vote.
You read my article. Okay. Any questions from the group? Star Child? Can you go to a microphone, please?
Star Child, I'm chair of the Libertarian Party in San Francisco. Normally I wouldn't ask you about a question that you just kind of addressed. However, I think this issue of freedom of movement is so important for libertarians to get right, and it ties into the larger issue of nationalism that I just want to give you a couple thoughts on that anyway and hear your responses. I often point out to the people these days, when talking about, open borders comes up and they're like, oh, that's too radical, that's impossible, And I point out we have 99% open borders in this country now. You can go between states and counties and cities without encountering border guards or fences or customs officials, any of that, despite the vast socioeconomic, religious, ethnic differences in this country among all the inhabitants. You can go from South Central LA to Beverly Hills, no walls, nothing. It works so great, we barely notice it. That's the crazy thing. And I just wanted to quote you something from your website. You said, America ceded control of our immigration to Mexican cartels, who made between $50 and $75 billion, running up to 20 million undocumented immigrants into the United States between 2001 and 2025. If that's true, then the current closed border policies that create the financial incentive, the black market, to make that money smuggling people, basically handed that money, $50 to $75 billion to the cartels. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts?
So this is where in my opinion, two libertarian ethos clash. And the two are the following. We have personal freedom, and everybody has personal freedom unless it infringes on other people's personal freedom, right? So part of the one of the few sacrosanct functions of government is to protect its people, right? We live in a global environment. It's not just Mexico and California. And there are people out there and countries out there and ideologies out there that mean to do us harm. They would love nothing more than to clobber us and take us out. And so the thing is, when you talk about completely open borders and the free flow of people, which I agree in a perfect world and in a right environment, I think it would be fantastic. I'm for that. But I know for a fact, I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I believe based on everything I've studied, how's this, that there are definitely criminal elements that are here on purpose that mean to do us harm. So the thing is, I think we have to have laws that vet that and at the same time have a much more open immigration policy that we can control, but it cannot be the chaos that we had 2021 to 2025.
Thank you.
Yes, California has some of the poorest performing schools in the nation, and America has some of the poorest performing schools of any industrialized nation. California ranks 47th in educational achievement, while the United States ranks 25th in math, 21st in science, and 24th in reading among other industrialized nations. And we cannot compete with countries such as Japan and Germany if this continues. What would you do to solve the educational problems we have?
Okay, my proposal is fairly radical, but here's the background. We have a 450-year-old model of education. We build this concrete here, and we have people that go sit at the feet of masters to learn something, right? That's been going on a long time. Problem was the world was a lot different when that started. And now it's incredibly expensive to provide those services and that education for people to go and live and go to school. And about 35 years ago, both major parties decided, you know, wouldn't it be good if everybody could get a higher education? That was going to be the ticket. So unlimited student loans for everybody. Now the highest debt category, above even consumer credit. People then that are young, that have gone through this system and come out of school owing 150, pick your number, 200,000, can't pay it off to their mid-40s, removes the entire entrepreneurial class of people that we need. They can't be in debt to be entrepreneurs and jump in the market. The other thing is, I spoke to you briefly, but so California right now is 43% Latino, Hispanic Californian. By 2060, it's going to be over 50% easily, might even be 54, 55 by then, depending on what survey you look at. We cannot be 35th in reading, 38th in math, and spend $30,000 a student when you count all the school bonds and the unfunded obligations of pensions and the cost per teachers, et cetera. I'm proposing a radical new education system, which is a modular system where the money follows, the money from any government source and private money follows the student, that they're analyzed between the age of 6 and 9 as to how they learn. And then modules are created that were custom designed for that particular student. Now, here's the radical part. Every time you pass a module, which would be under extreme conditions, you had to be tested, et cetera, but you showed competency in that module. Then you stack those modules. That's your resume for the rest of your life, and even as continuing education as an adult. Particularly for the immigrant community and all immigrants communities, not just Latino Californios, but everybody else as well. If you have a system that you can self-study and you can pass, like with homeschooling or something, you can pass a module or two on your own, well, guess what? If that module, all of the government money would flow into an account where you have an educational savings account. If that module costs $500 for you to complete with one of the providers, and these would all be private companies, I apologize in advance, but I would do away with public education. It's too broken. And it has to be choice. So if that would happen, then we could jump the generation that's coming of Latino immigrants And they would be tomorrow's scientists and doctors and lawyers and everything else, where today they're only 10% of management. They would be more representative of people that are actually going to be the majority population in the state. And so I think a modular private provider system would cost way less. You could go on your own speed, and here's the kicker. If you homeschooled a subject, and let's say your mother got involved and she had 3 children or something, and you passed these modules with only your mother's help, et cetera, that half of the money, 1/3 of the money, but half of what you could keep would go to that family. So the mother could actually get compensated for her role in teaching a module that otherwise you'd have to spend another 25 or 33% on. Now, if you go back to that subject, if you passed it yourself, then you have a scholarship when you're done with your K through 12 equivalent. And by having that scholarship, because you passed it on your own, gives an incentive for people to learn at the rate that they want to learn at. People could go very, very quickly. And that's what I would do. My system is in my, on my website, and that's what I would do. I think public schools, city schools, things like that in the future should only exist for social education like sports and dance and drama and things like that. And everything else should be done privately with private providers.
No, wait a minute. You're not telling me that parents are in a better position to determine the right schooling for their children than the government is, are you?
Yes.
Milton Friedman is a hero of mine, and he was the first one that I know of that came out with school choice. You said, I think the words you used were the money will follow the student. So you basically do favor school choice. By the way, he also said incentives matter. And if the students all of a sudden were leaving the public schools who have no incentive today to get better, but if now they're losing their source of income, wouldn't the public schools also have an incentive to get better and start competing?
That question is theoretical, so I'll answer with my own opinion. There's no facts behind this, but I seriously think that the age of the kind of schooling that we grew up with and that we understand and that we've modeled everything after is done. I don't think that we should, with all the technology, I think revolution is education is the revolution that hasn't happened yet. It should have happened around the time of the internet. We should have been majorly cutting costs. Instead, we've increased administration. I can't believe when I go to campuses now that I went to a few years back, and now they're like small cities. And yet they have 160% more administrative jobs than they used to, et cetera. This is not working. We have to rethink it radically. And we can't keep spending the money that we spend, and this unholy alliance between teachers' unions and the Democratic Party has to go. That's how I feel about it.
June Jennis, Riverside County. I live in the so-called Inland Empire east of the city of Riverside. It takes me about 2 hours minimum to get to anywhere on the coast. So I love the idea of being able to hop into a flying vehicle instead. But I worry about how we prevent 2 of those things from hitting each other. In a road, at least you're following a defined path. So I'm wondering how you would see this being implemented in a safe way. Are you going to require certain kinds of safety features on the vehicles or what?
That's a fantastic question. A lot of the companies that have been in this space that are developing these VTOLs and eVTOLs, electric and fuel powered, have all kinds of things written about that. Skyways have to be developed. New industries would sprout on this. We would create enormous amounts of jobs. If we manufactured them here in California, it would create a lot of jobs. My idea in implementing this first is to have law enforcement have them first, because their experience will play into and inform the private sector on. So make them for law enforcement and then take that body of knowledge and expand it into the general public. But there would be, just like when we had to convert from horse-drawn carriages to gasoline and into freeways and cars and all that, we would have the same kind of technological challenges to adopt to a new technology. Does that make sense?
We'll take one more question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I want to thank you for running, first and foremost. I have a 2-part question. One part is, what can you do for the party? And the other part is, how can we help you?
So I love the talk at lunch today. By the way, kudos to all the candidates. That was fantastic. I think we had 3 great candidates. And I enjoyed hearing the opinions of each one of them. But I share the view as a newbie here that we need to recruit members. Now, I'm going to add to that. I think we need to recruit heavily into a sector that most of us sitting here today have no idea how to do it, and that's the Latino community. Because they have so much to gain from a libertarian governance. And they have so much to lose if it keeps going the way it's. They're going to be shuffled out of the market. They're going to be consigned to jobs and careers and everything that are going to still be subservient to whatever happens. And I think we should have. I think we should have a massive membership drive for libertarians, and it should be Gen Z, it should be Latinos, it should be other immigrants, and then the general public. So that's one of the things I think that should happen. And for me, in every event that I'm doing, we're trying to recruit members. Now, I don't think I'm going to be that effective because there's no way I can reach the millions that need to be reached in the 4 months of the primary that I have. But I do wish the entire party would unite together. We all throw bucks into the hat, and we start a campaign with some professional firm that's done this, and we recruit, and we sign up libertarians all over the place. A lot of people I talk to think they're libertarian, they just have never signed up. And I believe that if my experience is right, and there's a lot more out there that would like to be libertarian, they are tired of the polarity, and they're tired of the BS from both sides. And so my biggest thing would be to recruit.
I was going to give you a minute to close if you have any final thoughts, but I think you just gave them to us. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I've spoken a lot, and I appreciate the time, everybody. If you have questions, you can see me here and at the gala, and I look forward to it. I look forward to meeting you and talking to you, and go ahead and let me have it if you don't agree with something, etc.
What is your website address?
It's
What is your
Woodard.
website address?
It's on a card over here if you'd like, but it's woodardforgovernor2026.com. I know it's long.
I thank you all for being here for this convention. I certainly thank you all for being with us this evening. I look forward to having you with us at dinner. And Dr. Woodard, thank you for your assistance. Good luck to you. We wish you well.